What do you call them? The Winter Games? The Winter Olympics? Some advocates are calling for a boycott of the quote-unquote Genocide Games. And they're right around the corner, by the way. What are we, November 23rd? February 2022, that's when the Olympics are supposed to begin in Beijing. Athletes are calling for boycotts. People in the business community, a whole bunch of, human rights activists are calling for a boycott of these Olympic Games happening in Beijing. Let's go back to somebody who's been on the show before. We had a wonderful discussion, and he returns this morning. Dr. Richard Baka joins us on the line, Olympic scholar and co-director of the Olympic Research Network at the Institute for Health and Sport at Victoria University. Richard, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Elias.
So, listen, I mean, I'm looking at the calendar. There's no way you're stopping these Olympics. You know what I mean? It seems like we're just too close. But the calls keep mounting. There just seems to be story after story here. What's the latest, Richard?
Well, there's calls at various levels to try and boycott the games, which boycotts don't seem to work. We tried it in 1980 and 84, and we kind of went past that because they just don't seem to achieve anything, and athletes suffer tremendously as a result. But we've still got people persisting because of the Chinese human rights issues, and it's on various fronts. There's calls for diplomatic boycotts, so the athletes would still go, but the politicians and VIPs wouldn't go. Athletes, not so much. They want to go ahead with it, but someone like Cantor, the basketball player, wanted to do it, but his sport isn't even in the Winter Olympics. But the athletes are maybe going to be able to mildly protest because they've changed the rules. 50.2 charter rule in the IOC charter says that they can now do sort of minor protests against the Chinese human rights issues. And then there's the boycott, perhaps from the broadcast side, that hasn't pushed ahead, and protesters from various human rights watch groups and others, Tibetan groups, they're the ones that are pushing it the most. So there's various levels that are looking at this. And of course, the IOC doesn't want the games to be boycotted and not go ahead.
Oh, yeah, especially after what they've gone through with COVID and the Tokyo Games. The last thing they need is another Olympics that doesn't go according to plan. And now, Richard, you brought up an example here. You brought up Enes Kanter, the NBA basketball player. And I think it's such a great example because to me, this all comes down to people are afraid of China. China's a superpower, and right now they have so much power that if you go against the Chinese regime, you pay for it. So Enes Kanter, his team is the Boston Celtics. So China's banned Boston Celtics games from TV. You cannot air Boston Celtics basketball in China anymore. So they are very willing to enforce their might, and I think that's why you've got the hesitance.
Yes, and I support a lot of the causes in this one. They're very good causes. In hindsight, the games should have never been given back to Beijing. They had this come up when they had the 2008 games, when they were bidding for those. The rights issues were there, and they thought they'd improve. But there were very few bids for the Winter Games this time around. The IOC gave it back to China. And in the future, this won't happen because the IOC is going to weed out countries that are in this position in the future. But we're stuck with this one now, and it's a real hornet's nest.
We're with Dr. Richard Baka, Olympic scholar, co-director of the Olympic Research Network. I just want to go back on what you just said, that in the future this won't happen. To me, let me just throw this at you. I don't think so, because I think the IOC only knows one thing, and that's money. And it seems like the only people that are bidding, especially Winter Olympics at times, seems to be the despots, seems to be the dictators that want these games as a way to do a PR campaign.
Well, that's partly true. Vancouver wants to perhaps put a bid in again, but the public at the moment, because of COVID and the cost of the possible games, they perhaps want to go ahead with a winter and maybe even a summer games, but the public maybe doesn't want it. So the IOC is a strange fish. They're very much a male-dominated group that wants the games to go ahead. It's in their best interests, of course, and they're stuck on this. So we'll have to wait to see what happens in the future, but I don't think it'll be as much of an issue. That's just my prediction on it, because they can weed out the problem issues. We won't have a Chinese human rights issue again, in my opinion. But like you said, those countries that are putting their hands up, but I don't think they'll get by the IOC. They won't want to relive this again in the future.
But Richard, I don't know if you can go down the list of the issues that leads to these games being called the Genocide Games. But if you go down the list of the things that China has been accused of, what human rights advocates are saying that China does, and then they still have the games. I mean, it just seems like there's nothing a country could do to get them to lose an Olympic Games.
Yeah, and the latest one, of course, is the Peng Shuai one, where the tennis player has been not seen, and then finally Thomas Bach, the IOC president, spoke to her online, but we weren't sure that was a valid interview because she had Communist Party officials there with her, and that's the latest one, and it just gets added to the list. It's just huge. This particular, these particular games are a political fireball. I can't describe it any other way. In hindsight, I think the IOC should have looked at this over a year ago and actively pushed for them to be relocated. It could have been a Gangchong or a Vancouver and relocated them. They wouldn't be in this position. Then force China's hand, but they haven't chosen to do that because of what you said. They protect their bottom line.
So I'm so happy you brought up Peng Shuai because I think it highlights some of the issues here. So China's actually this morning China's responding to the whole Peng Shuai controversy. China's saying that the tennis star case has been, quote, maliciously hyped up. And to me, Richard, you have a government that's being accused of genocide, and it didn't lead to the backlash a lot of people wanted. But then you have this accusation of sexual assault by a tennis player, and then she disappears for days, and that seemed to have gotten more traction than some of the incredibly egregious things that China's also been accused of. So does that show you maybe, because there's such a social media uproar, does that show you maybe the right way to move forward to put pressure on China?
Well, yes, and Richard Pound, one of your Montrealers there, he's the former vice president. He came out saying it's likely the game's going to go ahead, but this latest one adds to the all the issues, and there's still a chance they might not go ahead or be relocated and perhaps run next year. He's saying never say never, but it just adds to the issue. It's a smaller issue compared to the other ones, but it just compounds, and the human rights groups are looking at this, and it's more fuel for their fire. So we'll have to see what transpires. There's still over 2 months to go, and lots of action on diplomatic boycotts, at least perhaps occurring. Biden not going, the UK foreign minister or Boris Johnson not going. The Canadians may be supporting that diplomatic boycott, so VIPs and politicians wouldn't go. That's minimally going to happen, I would think.
If they do that, Richard, does it have to be a group effort? Does it have to be many countries getting together, or are there certain countries that can go it alone with statements like that?
Well, the Winter Games have fewer countries involved, but the strong ones, Canada, the U.S., if they support it, others probably would follow suit. Probably other countries wouldn't. They'd still send their athletes and their politicians, of course, and their VIPs. For example, Putin from Russia says he's going even though his team is officially not competing as the Russian Olympic team.
Yeah.
So, it'll be a mixed bag of things. Sebastian Coe, the former Olympian and the former president of LOCOG that organized the 2012 Summer Games in London, and he's very involved, of course, in the Olympics, World Athletic President. He's saying, it's not, the boycott's not going to work. The sport's being used as a pawn in all of this. Let it go ahead. And he's a former athlete and a very big sport, promoter and sport advocate.
Dr. Richard Baka is an Olympic scholar and co-director of the Olympic Research Network. Richard, thank you so much for coming on. I really enjoyed your piece in the conversation as well. So thanks for coming on the show.
Anytime, Elias. Maybe we'll do it again. There'll be some more issues come up, I'm sure.
That's right. Speak in February, I imagine.